Well, the story of the escape of Mary and Joseph and their newborn baby is only found in the Gospel of Matthew. And I should note as well, just for full disclosure, that there is no record whatsoever in antiquity that would indicate that a lot of little children had gotten killed. However, it may well be the case that Herod, when he discovered that Joseph had slipped out of the country, decided not to kill all those little boys. Let me read the story. It's important to Matthew that the story be included, and it's only one of two stories about Jesus as a child other than his birth. The other one being at the age of 12 when he leaves his family and is talking to the wise people in the temple and the synagogue. Jesus escapes, obviously, after they, being the angels, had left and the men had left, who brought gifts to Jesus. After they had left, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph and said to him, "Get up and take the child and his mother and run away to Egypt and stay there until I tell you to leave. Herod will be looking for the child to kill him." So Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and left during the night for Egypt, where he stayed until Herod died. This was done to make come true what the Lord had said through the prophet, "I called my son out of Egypt." When Herod realized that the visitors from the east had tricked him, he was furious. He gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and their neighborhood who were 2 years old or younger, in accordance with what had been learned from the visitors from the time when the star had appeared. In this way, what the prophet Jeremiah had said came true. A sound is heard in Ramah, the sound of bitter crying and weeping. Rachel weeps for her children. She weeps and will not be comforted because they are all dead. After Herod had died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said to him, "Get up and take the child and his mother and go back to the country of Israel, because those who tried to kill the child are dead." So Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and went back to the country of Israel. When he heard that Archelaus had succeeded Father Herod as king of Judah, Joseph was afraid to settle there. He was given more instruction in a dream, and so went to the province of Galilee and made his home in the town of Nazareth. He did this to make come true that the prophets had said he will be called a Nazarene. Now, none of you, I suspect, were alive during the end of the Russian Revolution. It took place between 1905, which was an early revolution effort, and the effort to rid the nation of its imperial leadership through the Tsar. And it ended in 1923, so 100 years ago. What happened then had changed Russia and its leadership and its place in the world dramatically. Nancy and I had the opportunity to have dinner with a couple who lived on Trout Lake. They were wonderful people, very humble, gentle, kind, compassionate, and giving kinds of folks. And we were invited to come to their home for a dinner. During the course of our evening, we began to talk about our backgrounds, and we then began to talk with Les about his background. And it turns out that during the Russian Revolution, he worked for International Harvester. And International Harvester was a major manufacturer in Russia, as well as a provider of massive millions and millions of dollars worth of farm implements and equipment and logging equipment, as were other companies like Singer and a score of others who had made their way into Russia to conduct their international trade. Well, because he was an American, and because Americans at that time were engaged in war during the First World War, and Russia had pulled out of the war and had also just recently lost a war with Japan, Americans were not at all fond of, nor were they fond of the companies that they represented, because they had worked so closely with the Tsar. And of course, so often what happens is the companies make sure that the leadership of the country are well paid for their looking the other way oftentimes. Anyway, it was Les's conclusion and the company's conclusion that the employees of International Harvester had to get out of the country and get out as quick as they could because their lives were at risk. Turns out that if a male went with a female, both were significantly at risk. So Les and his wife split up. She left with two of their children who were then part of the family. And she entered a train, and the train went all the way from Moscow to the coast of China. But before it could reach China, it had to go through much of the Russian territory. It was subsequently attacked either by the army of the Tsar, because they thought people were trying to escape, as was the case, and it was attacked by the rebels as well. Les's wife said, we were grateful for God's presence in our lives and our protection. They did arrive safely on the coast of China, and then were in a ship which took them to San Francisco. Les, on the other hand, along with other males, had to do a clandestine escape out of Russia through the Balkans or through upper parts of Europe, the Scandinavian countries down into Denmark, and then eventually into England. And then eventually he could go by boat to New York, across country to San Francisco, where he and his wife could be reunited well over a month and a half to 2 months later. I tell that story because they remarked about how dangerous it was and how fearful they was that they would lose their lives, and that this was a terribly risky time in their life. And they were so grateful to be alive that it underscored their sense of humility, their sense of thankfulness, and their grateful spirit for the life that they were able to live together as a family. It was a wonderful conversation. Now, it's very clear that there have been other instances that are very real to us today of people who need to escape for their lives and for the lives of their children. I think of the women who are leaving Ukraine, desperately leaving to find a place where their children can be safe, where if they're pregnant, they can give birth to their child without the risk of being bombed in a maternity ward or hospital. So hundreds of thousands of women and children have gone into any number of European countries, particularly into Poland. But many have come to the United States as well to wait out this war. I think also of the women who bring their children up from Central America. where there is such disorder and confusion. And tragically, they're caught up wanting to escape that setting so that their lives can be made hopeful and peaceful again, and that their children might be able to live and have an education that will give them a chance to succeed. I think of the soldiers who had assistance from the Afghan people who were able to do interpretation of the language, were able to help them during the Afghan war, who were promised that they could leave. Many were able to, but many are still trapped in Afghanistan. And the risk that they take in trying to leave. Others who are clearly oppressed, including women who want to be engaged in work, who have professional skills, women who want their daughters to get an education, and others in Afghanistan who are oppressed, including a very large population of gay and lesbian women and men. I mention these because very clearly seeking safety, seeking a secure place to live is not at all uncommon. And so for Matthew to include this story reminds us again and again and again of the need for us as disciples of Jesus to do something to bring safety and wholeness to the world so that children can grow up safe. Children can grow without the fear of being exterminated, so that women can have education, so that families can pursue their dreams and desires to have a good and quality life as a family and as persons. I think of this story, knowing not for sure how clear it is that it clearly happened. That may not be the issue, frankly. The issue is Matthew thought it was important to share this story well into and past the death of Jesus as part of his commentary about the life and ministry of Jesus. Now, as important as Jesus' birth is, and as important as it is that Jesus survived that particular event in the course of his life, and as important as it is for us to understand how smart, how wise, how insightful Jesus was, even at the age of 12, what is really important for us is that we recognize that the message that comes from Jesus, his life, his ministry, his willingness to give of himself in a self-sacrificial way, is that which calls us to give and to seek ways to serve our Christ. Now, there are several other things that I draw from this story, and I want to share those very briefly. It's very clear that as a child, Jesus was a troublemaker. Even as an infant, as one person has said, he was good trouble. He was trouble for those who sought power at the expense of others. He was trouble for those who were self-centered and arrogant. He was trouble for those who thought that material things were all in life, and that caring for others and being thoughtful about the needs of other people was irrelevant. If you could climb over the bodies and the spirits and the lives and the hopes and dreams of others, Jesus was there to remind you that the mentally ill were important to him, that those who had disease were important to him, that the person who was struggling to make sense out of their life was important to him, that every person who came to him or who he saw who had a need, he responded. And interestingly enough, so many of those folks were the disadvantaged, the dispossessed, and the rejected of the society in which Jesus lived. Jesus, even as a child, was a troublemaker for Herod and for Pilate. Secondly, Jesus was one, even as a child, who had the promise of dreams and hopes to be fulfilled, that life could be better, life could be more precious, life could be celebrated, and that life could be affirmed even into eternity because of this one. You may recall Herod said to the wise person who came looking for the birth of this Messiah, "Oh, go find him so that I too might go worship him." But in fact, what he wanted to do was to destroy this one who could bring hope to the people who were oppressed. Thirdly, it is clear to me that through the birth of Jesus, there is a worthy acknowledgement and adulation of this birth, and also an indication that there would be one who would become King of Kings, Lord of Lords. And by that I mean, and by that the New Testament message means, he would be king of God's kingdom, a kingdom of love, of gentleness, compassion, warmth, and sensitivity, an understanding that all people, regardless of who they are brothers and sisters in God's holy family. So we are heirs and ancestors to that wonderful story. We are the ones who benefit so richly from the birth, the life, the ministry, the death, resurrection of this Jesus. The story of his escape is a wonderful story, and it reminds us that we are called to serve one whose Creator God is our Creator God and gives to each of us likeness, and therefore we call ourselves Christ-like Christians. Amen.